Sunday mornings in our house used to be slow, almost sacred. Melissa liked to sleep in while I made coffee and putter around the kitchen, half reading the news, half watching the sunlight crawl across the yard. It was the one time of the week when neither of us was rushing anywhere, when the world outside seemed quieter and the only noise came from the low hum of the fridge and the occasional clink of my coffee spoon against the mug. That morning, I wasn't looking for trouble. I'd been reorganizing some folders on my laptop, mostly work files and family photos, when I clicked into our shared cloud drive. We'd set it up years ago so we could automatically back up pictures from both our phones. Melissa liked the convenience. Her phone was always snapping pictures for work, for Instagram, for whatever random thing caught her attention. The new uploads were sitting there, unsorted. At first glance, they seemed like any other. Melissa out in the city, a couple *TS of her cappuccino with that little swirl of foam she always admired. A few of herself framed against cafe windows with warm, golden light streaming in. It was the third photo that stopped me. In it, Melissa was laughing. Really laughing, head tilted back, her eyes crinkled at the corners. It wasn't a selfie. Someone else had taken it from across the table. Behind her, the cafe's large front window reflected the street scene. But in that reflection, my eyes caught something I almost wished I hadn't seen. Melissa's right hand wasn't resting on the table at all. It was joined with someone else's across the small round table. The reflection was a little warped by the glass, but I could still make out enough detail. A man's arm, pale skin, dark blazer, the glint of a wristwatch I recognized. It took me a second, but then the face clicked. Our neighbor from the office parking lot. I didn't know his name, but I'd seen him enough times, parking 2 spaces over from Melissa's car on weekday mornings, to know it was him. A small knot formed in my stomach. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was just a friendly gesture. Maybe I was misreading the angle. Maybe the reflection distorted the whole thing. But then I noticed there were 3 more photos from the same outing. In each, Melissa's smile was different, softer, the kind of smile she hadn't given me in months, if I was being honest with myself. I closed the laptop, trying to shake the feeling. It was probably nothing. People hold hands for all kinds of reasons, right? Maybe she was comforting him over something. Maybe that was when the second punch landed. I'd opened my banking app to check if the payment for the new lawnmower had cleared. I don't usually scan every transaction in detail, but my eyes caught on a string of withdrawals. Cash, each one about $120. Always from the same ATM near the roadside motel off Route 14. The same place we used to pass on the way to my cousin's house. The one Melissa once joked looked like it was straight out of a bad detective show. The withdrawals had started a few months back, every couple of weeks like clockwork. Not enough to raise red flags from the bank's perspective, but enough to make my pulse quicken. I sat there for a long minute, staring at the screen, my coffee cooling beside me. My mind began stitching things together. The reflection in the cafe window, the withdrawals, the way she'd been working late more often, how her phone was suddenly face down on the table every time she came home. By the time Melissa wandered into the kitchen, hair still messy from sleep, I had decided to ask her directly. Not accuse, just ask. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice casual. "Were you at that cafe on Pine Street yesterday?" She blinked at me, surprised. "Yeah, why?" "I saw the pictures in the cloud," I said. "Looked like you were there with someone from the office parking lot. You two holding hands?" The pause before she answered was short but loud. Then she smiled. Not her usual smile, but the tight, polite one she used on strangers. "Daniel," she said softly, "are we really doing this? On a Sunday morning?" I started, but she cut me off. "You've been spending so much time in the garden lately. It's like you barely notice I'm around. I'm exhausted. I've been carrying so much at work, and now you're going to nitpick about a photo?" Her voice wasn't sharp. It was weary, like she'd been saving up this speech. "I can't even have coffee with someone without you reading into it?" "It's not just the photo," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I noticed some cash withdrawals. Always from that ATM near the old motel." She laughed, quick and humorless. "You've been checking my spending?" What is this, an interrogation? Should I start filing reports for every time I buy groceries or fill up the car? The conversation spiraled from there. Somehow, within minutes, we weren't talking about the photos or the ATM anymore. We were talking about how I'd been overwatering the lawn, how the sprinklers ran at odd hours, how she felt like the roses were getting more attention than she was. By the time she walked out of the kitchen to shower, I was left standing there wondering how the whole thing had flipped so neatly onto me. I told myself it was just a misunderstanding, that I'd let my imagination run too far. But the images wouldn't leave my head. Her hand in his, the glint of that watch in the reflection, and the small green numbers of the withdrawals on my phone screen. And no matter how much I tried to bury it under chores, coffee, and the Sunday quiet, one thought kept surfacing. If it was really nothing, why did she work so hard to make me feel like I was the problem? If the Sunday photos were a ripple, the weeks after felt like the tide dragging me sideways. I kept telling myself I was being dramatic, that a warped cafe reflection and a few ATM withdrawals didn't add up to anything. But once the seed was planted, every little thing around the house sprouted thorns. It started with location sharing. We'd left it on for years because it made life easier. If Melissa saw my dot still at the hardware store, she'd text to add potting soil. If I saw hers at the office, I'd start dinner. One night, her dot just vanished. Offline? The app said, like it had cleared its throat and excused itself. The next day, still offline. The day after that, same. When I asked, she said her phone was acting up after an update. I offered to take a look. She smiled like I was sweet and slightly dumb and said she'd already fixed it. She hadn't. The dot never came back. Then the planning meetings began. Melissa doesn't do event planning. She builds marketing decks, negotiates vendor rates, argues about ad buys. And yet, suddenly, she had planning meetings at odd hours. She'd say it the same way each time, like it was a laminated pass she could flash and breeze right by me. Don't wait up, we've got planning. The meetings somehow never appeared on the shared calendar we both relied on. When I asked what they were planning, she said, Q3, as if a whole quarter could be a destination with secret coordinates. A new perfume followed. Not a present from me, and not anything I recognized from our bathroom cabinet. It wasn't strong, exactly. More like a whisper that hovered a few inches behind her, sweet and cool and not for me. The first time I kissed her cheek with it on, the scent felt like a foreign body in our hallway. When I asked what it was, she said a coworker wore it and she wanted a change. She smiled at me like I should be happy she'd upgraded, and I tried to be, but all I felt was the distance between us wearing nice shoes. She also started carrying a gym bag, navy with white piping, brand new enough to squeak when it brushed the doorframe. I'm going to hit the gym, she'd sing out, the way people announce something ordinary to make it sound unthreatening. When she came home, she'd head straight to the shower, but the bag never looked used. One night, while the water ran, I nudged it with my foot. The towel was dry as paper. The water bottle was full. The soles of her sneakers were clean enough to eat off. Little things began to pile up into a shape that cast a shadow. A man's tie clip showed up on the passenger side mat of her car. Simple silver. The kind you forget you're wearing until it slides off. I found it with the shop vac when I was cleaning crumbs out of the creases. I held it up when she came in from the garage. This yours? I asked, and I already knew the answer. She blinked like I'd pulled a coin from behind her ear. Jason from the office parking lot borrowed my car for coffee runs last week, she said. Too fast. He probably dropped it. Jason, the guy with the silver SUV I'd seen swinging into the lot next to her spot 100 times. I set the clip on the entry table and told myself not to jump to conclusions. Then I watched her glance at it twice in 5 minutes, like it was ticking. Her phone turned into a black brick. Notifications used to light it up. Texts from her sister, Slack pings, calendar dings. Now nothing surfaced unless she picked it up and woke it herself. If a buzz did slip out, she flipped it face down like muscle memory. I joked about her going monk mode, cutting out distractions. You hate pings, she said, laughing. True, but I didn't hate truth. New calendar entries began showing up on her screen when she'd open it near me. Recurring blocks labeled hold or check in. No location, no invitees. Just gray bars occupying Tuesdays and Thursdays at strange hours. The labels were bland in that corporate way that covers everything and means nothing. When I asked, she said they were placeholders so she wouldn't overbook. She said it while rearranging the fruit bowl, like scheduling was as random as oranges. At night, the house kept secrets it didn't want. Around 1:12 a.m. Then again at 1:16, the garage sensor chimed on my phone. Motion detected. I'd lie there listening for the motor. Nothing. Just the quiet of the ducks settling. Then the camera would push a clip. Headlights easing over the driveway. A silver SUV gliding to the curb, idling, then ghosting away without ever parking. The plates never came into focus, but the profile looked familiar. Same height, same slope of hood as the one I'd seen next to Melissa's car in the office lot. The first time, I told myself it was a random ride share lost on our street. The second time felt like a rehearsal. The third time felt like a ritual. I started keeping a list. Not a manifesto, just a column on the last page of my planner. Location sharing disabled, planning meetings, new perfume, gym bag always dry, tie clip, notifications gone, vague calendar blocks, silver SUV idling, 1 a.m. Writing it down made me feel less like a conspiracy theorist. A list is just facts with margins. One Wednesday, she came home buzzing like she'd stepped out of strong air conditioning into summer. She dropped the navy bag and kissed my cheek, and the perfume sat between us like a glass wall. Back to back to back, she said, grabbing a seltzer. My brain's soup. I asked if she wanted leftover pasta. I'm good, she said. Then drifted to the patio and scrolled her phone with the kind of careful thumb you use when you don't want anyone to see the reflection in your eyes. We ate later than usual, and the silence felt padded, like a room staged for a photo. Every time I tried to bring up one item from the list, I saw our last Sunday morning play out. The way she redirected me to my rose bushes and how much water I used. The way I ended up defending irrigation instead of asking why a stranger's hand was in hers at a cafe. It's a neat trick, deflection. If you do it right, the other person becomes so busy explaining themselves that they forget what they asked. That week, the cameras caught the SUV again. Same glide, same pause, same careful exit. I zoomed until the pixels broke apart and still got nothing clear enough to print. The headlights flared once, then dimmed. A signal? A test? Maybe just a habit. But some habits choose you. By Friday, Melissa had quietly stopped using our shared grocery list and started one in an app one didn't recognize. Saturday, she mentioned a team offsite a month away and asked if I could feed the neighbor's cat while she was gone. When I asked where they were going, she said it hadn't been decided. I tried to picture a team booking an offsite with no city, no agenda, just vibes and hope. The image fell apart under its own weight. I kept telling myself there were innocent explanations. There always are if you stack them right. Maybe a software update K*led location sharing. Maybe planning is the new buzzword for status meetings. Maybe the perfume was a treat, the gym bag an aspirational purchase, the tie clip a fluke, the calendar blocks real, the SUV lost. But explanations are not the same as answers, and mine felt like patched drywall. Smooth at a glance, brittle if you push. I decided I needed proof, the kind that doesn't depend on tone or timing or who's better at turning a question into steam. But belief has a way of sprinting ahead of evidence. I lay there at night, watching the driveway on my phone like it was a weather map, counting the seconds between garage chimes, breathing in that new scent on her pillow, feeling both foolish and unbearably awake. The list at the back of my planner grew by one more line. All these details forming a pattern I couldn't unsee. There's a difference between suspicion and gravity. Suspicion hovers in the air, drifting between doubt and denial. Gravity drops. Mine fell on a Thursday evening, right when the cicadas were tuning up and the street was painted in the bruised purple of a dying day. The proof didn't come from some dramatic confrontation or whispered confession. It came from the dashcam I'd installed months earlier after a hailstorm cracked 2 windshields on our block. It was a cheap insurance policy in my mind, the kind that quietly records squirrels crossing your driveway or the occasional delivery driver's wrong turn. Most of the time, I forgot it was there. That Thursday, I was late getting back from the hardware store. Mulch sale, 2 for 1. My phone pinged in my pocket. Motion detected, front drive. I figured it was the mail carrier or a kid's basketball rolling into the yard. But then came another ping. And another. By the time I set the bags of mulch down in the garage, my chest had tightened in that quiet way that doesn't feel like panic yet, but knows it's coming. I plugged the dashcam into my laptop on autopilot. The feed opened with the familiar shimmer of summer heat bending the light, the driveway framed in amber. Our mailbox stood in the corner of the sh*T like a silent witness. Headlights eased into frame and clicked off. A silver SUV rolled to a stop at the curb. The driver's door opened. Jason, the neighbor I knew from the office parking lot, stepped out. Even in grainy resolution, I recognized the way he looked around, scanning for movement that wasn't there. Then the passenger door opened. Melissa. She slid out like she belonged in his passenger seat, smoothed her skirt with both hands, and met him halfway between the SUV and our porch. They stood close enough that no one could mistake it for casual conversation. Jason said something. Melissa laughed, tilting her head in that way I'd once thought was mine alone. And then he reached for her. Not hesitantly, not testing the waters, like he knew exactly where the shoreline was. She rose on her toes and kissed him. In my driveway, under the same patch of sky where I taught her how to deadhead roses without losing a finger. I paused the video and leaned back so hard my chair bumped the wall. My hands were already pressed to my face, as if blocking the light could undo the image. Didn't. I hit play again, forcing myself to watch. They broke apart but stayed tethered, foreheads almost touching, her hand brushing his arm. He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear with an int asterisk Macy that didn't need translation. She smiled. Not the quick, public smile she gave coworkers, but the one that lived in the corners of her mouth when she was content. She didn't look guilty. When she slid back into the passenger seat, it was with the comfort of routine. Jason circled the SUV, got in, and a moment later the headlights flared to life again. They pulled away, heading north, the same direction as the motel from my bank statement logs. The timestamp told me this wasn't their first trip. I watched it 10 times. 15. The scene didn't change, but something in me did. It wasn't suspicion anymore. It wasn't a half-formed theory scribbled in the back of my planner. It was a fact. Sharp-edged, replayable, immune to excuses. I copied the file to 3 separate drives. I took still frames of the kiss of the SUV, of their silhouettes together. Then I opened my bank statements, scrolling back to each motel-side withdrawal and highlighting them like measurements on lumber, square, undeniable. I added *TS from the security cams showing the silver SUV idling outside our house at 1 a.m. Headlights glowing faintly before fading. The more I compiled, the heavier it felt, as if the proof itself had its own gravity. That night, I emailed a lawyer. I'd never spoken to him before, but Jenna across the street had recommended him after her brother's split. Said he was calm, steady, allergic to theatrics. I attached the files and wrote, "Evening's okay? Evidence attached." He called within the hour. "You have enough," he said after letting me stumble through the story. "You have more than enough. Don't confront her again. File. Keep backups. Say as little as possible. Do you have somewhere you can go if you need space?" I looked out the window at the roses, petals curling in the heat, and said, "I'll be fine." We filed the next morning. By the weekend, the papers were ready for service. Melissa didn't try to deny the video when I laid the printed stills on the table. She just stared, her mouth half open, as if the words had gotten stuck somewhere between her chest and the air. "We've been struggling," she murmured. I felt alone. It happened so fast. Every sentence was a balloon without a string, floating just far enough away to be useless. By Wednesday, she'd packed for real. 2 suitcases, 3 boxes, the Navy gym bag that had been her decoy for months. We sorted our kitchen like it was a contested border. She claimed the copper ** let her mother had given us, but always considered hers. I let it go. She left me with a stack of t-shirts I didn't remember owning and a hollow on the couch where her legs used to curl under her. A month later, Jason's silver SUV was a regular fixture 2 houses down. They'd taken the rental with the leaning mailbox and the porch swing that squealed every time it moved. I saw our old coffee table through their front window one afternoon while walking the dog I'd finally adopted. Something I'd never done before because she wasn't a dog person. Melissa waved once, a little flutter of fingers that could have been mistaken for neighborly politeness. I nodded back, not in greeting, but in acknowledgement. Like two people standing in the same field when the wind shifts. People talk about breakups like they're clean breaks, one sound, one motion, 1 second where the world changes. Mine wasn't. It was a slow bleed followed by one undeniable cut caught on a lens I'd installed to keep squirrels from eating my wiring. I kept the video, not to torture myself, but to remind me that when doubt turns into weather humid, heavy, clinging, it only takes one shift in the wind for the sky to clear. And when I doubt now, when my mind whispers that maybe I overreacted, maybe there was something I could have done, I replay exactly 5 seconds, her rising on her toes, his hand at her cheek, the street lamp above them burning quietly while the world told the truth. When Melissa moved 2 houses down with Jason, I thought the hard part was over. The papers were filed, the assets divided, and the word marriage no longer hung around my neck like a stone. We weren't a couple anymore. We were just 2 people who happened to live on the same street. But the thing about proximity is that it keeps the embers warm. You can be done in every legal sense, but if the person who betrayed you is close enough for you to hear their wind chimes on a quiet night, done becomes a slippery word. At first, it was just the awkward overlaps. I'd be hauling mulch to the backyard, and they'd pull into their driveway, music thumping, Jason's laugh loud enough to carry. Or I'd be weeding by the roses and Melissa would glide past with her new little dog. One of those yappy, decorative breeds she'd sworn she hated when we were together. Her gaze fixed straight ahead, pretending she didn't see me. Then came the SUV. Jason's silver beast had been just a parking lot landmark when Melissa was mine. Now it was a wee *P***N. The first time it happened, I didn't even realize what I was looking at. Just a wide track through the grass near the driveway and a snapped stem where one of my rose bushes had been coaxing out new growth. I thought maybe the delivery van had cut the corner. But the next week, there was no mistaking it. I heard the engine before I saw the headlights. I was in the garage, oiling the hinges on the side door, when the beam swept across the far wall. I stepped to the threshold and caught him. Jason's SUV drifting just far enough over the property line to roll 2 tires across the edge of my lawn. It wasn't a full-on drive-through, just enough to crush pedals and leave those ugly, deep ruts that take months to fill. The first time, I told myself it might be sloppy driving. The second time, I knew better, especially when I caught sight of Melissa standing on their porch, phone in hand, holding it at that slightly raised angle you use when pretending not to film. She didn't post anything directly, no outright taunts. But the next morning, one of my friends sent me a *T from her social media. A photo of her porch coffee captioned, "Some things just grow better when you prune the dead parts away." In the background, blurred but still recognizable to anyone on this street, was the mangled corner of my rose bed. I didn't rise to it. I didn't yell or march over, or write an indignant post of my own. I'd learned from the marriage that direct confrontation with Melissa only meant she'd spin it until I was the one apologizing. Instead, I started building my defense. If Jason wanted to treat my lawn like a landing strip, fine. I'd make it the least inviting landing strip in the county. First came the cameras. I already had the dash cam and the 2 security cams on the garage, but I added low-profile units along the front edge of the yard, buried in shrubbery, angled to catch plates. Then the motion sensors, small, weatherproof pucks that could be buried under mulch and set to trigger whatever I connected them to. What I connected them to was my favorite part, high-pressure sprinklers. Not the slow, sweeping arcs of a polite irrigation system. These were directional jets wired to blast from ground level to windshield height the moment the sensors tripped. For good measure, I added a more mechanical deterrent, retractable tire spikes. They were marketed for private lots and long driveways, meant to drop when a sensor recognized an authorized plate. I set mine to stay lowered for my car and the mail carrier, but to rise at a shallow angle for anyone else drifting over that edge. Enough to make a point without shredding rubber unless they tried to push through. And because I wanted to make sure all of this was above board, I filed a civil complaint for property damage. The police wouldn't bother over a few crushed rose stems, but the city clerk would take a sworn statement and document repeat offenses. Paper trails are quieter than shouting matches, but they leave a longer shadow. By the time everything was in place, my lawn looked no different to a casual passerby. The roses were restaked, the grass filled in. But beneath the surface, the property line had teeth. Jason didn't know it yet, but the game had changed. The first time he tried after that, I was in the kitchen making coffee. I saw the motion alert pop up on my phone and set the mug down. The live feed showed his SUV edging toward the strip by the driveway. The second the tires rolled into range, the sprinklers erupted, twin jets slamming into the side of his vehicle with enough force to make him jerk the wheel. He sped up, swerving back into the street, and I swear I saw Melissa's head snap toward our house through the blur of water. He didn't try again that week. But the thing about people like Jason is that they can't stand to be made the butt of the joke. The following Saturday, he rolled slow past the house, windows down, sunglasses on, like he was casing it. I stood in the yard with my pruning shears, waved, and went back to the roses. That evening, I caught another post from Melissa. This time just a single leaf, wilted and brown, on a white background. Caption: "Some things just can't survive the season." I could have responded. I could have pointed out the city paperwork, the video evidence, the fact that every petty stunt they tried was now documented and timestamped. But I kept my peace. Because I wasn't playing to win an argument. I was building a record. And when you're playing the long game, silence is just another kind of P*N. By midsummer, I'd beg N to think maybe Jason had gotten the message. The sprinklers had hit him twice, and although the ruts from his earlier passes were still faintly visible in the grass, no new ones appeared. I was starting to let my guard down, at least enough to water the roses without glancing at the street every 30 seconds. Then came the week of the hearing. It wasn't the full trial yet, just a preliminary session in the civil suit for property damage. My lawyer had filed the complaint months ago, attaching security footage of the SUV's slow, deliberate trespasses, along with repair estimates for the lawn and the roses. The court date had been set, and part of me figured Jason might just skip showing up. But then I remembered the type of man he was. Jason wasn't the skip-out type, he was the swaggerin' type. The night before that hearing, the humidity was so thick it felt like it was clinging to my skin. I was in the garage doing one last check on the motion sensors and the sprinkler system. Call it superstition, but I didn't want anything to misfire when the court date was this close. The retractable spikes were working perfectly. They'd rise to a neat 35-degree angle when tripped, sharp enough to pierce rubber if someone forced the issue, low enough not to damage a bumper unless they really G*net it. It was just after 10 p.m. when my phone buzzed with the alert. Motion detected, front property line. I opened the live feed without even thinking. There it was, those familiar headlights sliding across the edge of the lawn like a thief testing a window. The SUV idled for a moment, the brake lights glowing red against the camera's monochrome night view. I saw the faint outline of Melissa in the passenger seat, head turned toward him, probably egging him on. Then the SUV rolled forward. The sensors lit in sequence, 1, 2, 3, and the sprinklers fired with their usual ferocity, slamming into the front grille and hood. But Jason didn't back off. He kept creeping, slow and deliberate, like he wanted to prove he could get closer this time. That's when the spikes came up. From my vantage point on the feed, they looked almost theatrical, thin black teeth rising out of the green strip of grass like something from an old war movie. The front tires met them with a sound I could feel in my jaw, a hollow thunk followed by the hiss of escaping air. Jason's brake lights flared, and for a second I thought he might try to push through anyway. But even he wasn't that stupid. He reversed awkwardly, the flattened rubber wobbling against the rims, and pulled back into the street. The SUV made it maybe 3 blocks before the flashing blue and red of a patrol car lit up the feed from the street cam at the corner. I didn't even have to call the police. The officer had been parked nearby, running traffic checks, and Jason's lopsided crawl had caught his attention. By the time they stopped him, I'd already saved the footage twice, once to my hard drive, once to the case folder I'd share with my lawyer in the morning. I barely slept that night, but it wasn't from nerves. It was the adrenaline, the low hum of satisfaction that comes from watching someone walk straight into a trap they'd been warned about. The next morning, I arrived at the courthouse in a clean shirt and a calm frame of mind. Jason was already there, leaning against the hood of a tow truck that now held his wounded SUV. The front tires were limp, shredded where the spikes had done their work. Melissa stood beside him, arms folded, wearing an expression I'd seen before, a mix of forced composure and simmering resentment. Inside, my lawyer laid it out in neat sequence. Security footage of Jason's repeated trespasses, the timestamps, the repair invoices, and now the latest clip showing the sprinklers, the spikes, and the inevitable patrol stop. The judge didn't even try to hide her exasperation as she scrolled through the still frames. "This isn't ambiguous," she said finally, looking at Jason over the top of her reading glasses. "This is intentional property damage." Jason tried to bluster about public right-of-way, about how the edge of my lawn wasn't technically mine to defend. My lawyer countered with property maps, city ordinances, and the fact that his tires were clearly well over the curb in every sh*T. The judge scheduled the full hearing for damages but made one thing very clear. If you set foot, vehicle or otherwise, on his property again, you're in contempt, and I'll see you back here for more than just a fine. Jason grinned like it didn't bother him, but the tightness in his jaw told another story. Melissa didn't smile at all. Back home, I checked the feed one more time. The cameras were still rolling, the spikes still in place, the sprinklers ready to fire. But I knew, even before the day was over, that the silver SUV wouldn't be trying again anytime soon. It's a strange feeling when a battle shifts, not because the other side waves a white flag, but because they realize they can't win without bleeding more than they're willing to. Watching that tow truck haul his car away from the courthouse wasn't just a small victory. It was the moment I knew the game had changed for good. The roses along the edge of the lawn still bore the scars from earlier runs, a few stems permanently bent where tires had crushed them into the soil. But now, when I watered them in the evenings, I didn't glance at the street expecting headlights. I didn't brace for the rumble of tires over grass. Jason could still rev his engine 2 houses down. Melissa could still post her little captions about pruning in seasons, but the message had landed. From now on, if they came my way, they'd be the ones hitting the brakes.